Hello everyone, it's Miss Misa here with a video on a very important topic that I feel needs to be explored more within the skeptic trademark community, but seems to have not been for the longest time. And that, ladies, gentlemen, non-binary and otherkin, is men losing custody of their children within divorce cases or child custody battles. Now, this video is a follow-up to a video that I made recently where I showed my greasy, spotty, ugly mug and spoke about female privilege and why it's a thing, despite what the SJWs and the feminists will tell you. The link to that video will be in the description if you want to go and bother to watch it, but it's trash, so I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. Now, I hope to make this whole concept into a mini-series if I can, where I discuss certain aspects of men's rights that we kind of need to address within the society that we live in and that are unfair for men. If you guys have any more suggestions or aspects of men's rights or female privilege that you want me to talk about in another video, then just let me know in the comments and I'll make a plan to discuss it and explain why it's a significant issue, whatever it is. Now, before I start this video, I need to clarify that I'm not claiming to be an expert in these issues that I've been researching, especially when it comes to men losing custody of their kids. And if I get anything wrong or miss anything out, then let me know. I do actually like getting criticism every now and then. But I took to asking friends to help me gather some information and using the fabulous tool known as Google to try and find some statistics and reasoning as to why the issue is even an issue in the first place. And the first thing that I noticed when doing my own research is that when you look into anything to do with men having been treated unfairly by the courts, you are bombarded by a plethora of feminist pieces claiming that men aren't treated unfairly by courts and that they're using this as some kind of way to hide their privilege over women and to feel oppressed as well. I mean, projection much? How many feminists use tiny things like mansplaining to feel oppressed and as if they're victims, am I right? Two notable articles were ones by the Huffington Post and Everyday Feminism, our favourite cancerous entities. The thing that I noticed in these articles in particular, and I will be linking them in the description in case you lot want to actually read them and feel as enraged as I did, is that they both talk about patriarchy and blame gender roles and men's need to demonize women for the fact that women receive custody more than men do. One of them even says that the system is changing as time goes on and that women are actually being awarded custody less often nowadays, and that joint custody is becoming some kind of new alternative to that. But the thing is, what these people don't seem to realize is that women are still being awarded custody more often than not, and that when joint custody is awarded, the child more times than not ends up still living with the mother, and the father is given less time to see the child. Not just because the man is usually working, but because that's what the mother wants. Now, obviously, there are anomalies in the situation through men who bail out and they don't want to be fathers, and I do understand that. However, guys, you can't always blame those kinds of people for the reason why women always get custody. I mean, believe it or not, girls, there are men who genuinely love their kids and want to be there for them and who aren't getting anywhere in court. Now, there hasn't been anywhere near as much research into this topic as I would have liked to have seen, but I did find something quite interesting. A couple of years ago, the University of Warwick spent £1,000 investigating into the courts and their supposed bias towards women and prejudice against men in regards to child custody battles, and guess what they found? They found that the courts weren't biased at all. Shocker. They claimed this because, according to them, 88% of fathers who applied to court for contact with their kids were awarded some kind of access. Now, that sounds great at first when you take into account the fact that some dads aren't fit to be parents, so 88% isn't really that bad. However, the thing is, some kind of access doesn't mean full access or even half and half shared between the father and the mother. An article critiquing this study/investigation, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, pointed out that 10% of fathers were restricted to indirect contact with their kids via phone, post, or Skype. And I don't know about you guys, but if I were a parent and that was all I was allowed, I would be fucking pissed. Also, 5% of these fathers were only allowed to see these kids in the company of a supervisor, and 23% were only allowed to see their children a few daytime hours a week. Now, one potential argument for this is that the fathers that didn't receive the custody agreement that they desired could have been abusive or treated their children badly. I mean, you wouldn't want your child to be constantly around someone who would mistreat them, right? However, you only have to look at the television and newspapers to know that some women don't allow their baby daddies to see their children for stupid, immature reasons, such as them having a new girlfriend or them not being together anymore. I know it's a stupid example and I used it in my previous video, but just look at shows like Jeremy Kyle. The women on there always use their kids as weapons against fathers for idiotic reasons. It does happen. I'll go into a good example of this in a few anyway. Plus, I do have to say that abuse is something that's really hard to detect or define. Mental abuse, for example, is, in my opinion, way more damaging to an individual and especially a child than physical abuse. I've experienced both, and I would say that the mental abuse fucked me up way more than the physical stuff did. But mental abuse isn't always so easy to detect, so it's actually quite easy to lie about. And trust me, it is lied about. Some of us do lie about it as a way to keep the fathers away and even manipulate the child into thinking that the father is bad, which, to be honest, in my opinion, is mental abuse in itself. I've seen this happen with my friends' parents quite a lot, like the mothers saying that the children are being yelled at constantly and manipulated into doing or saying things that they don't want to do when nothing could be further from the truth. It's pretty messed up. Plus, one thing that people who study or write about these statistics or articles don't seem to go into very often is male victims of domestic abuse, and even abusive mothers, mainly because society still seems to assume that women aren't capable of these kinds of things, which is another privilege that women have that men don't. We aren't always assumed to be violent or abusive towards our partners or our children, but that's another video for another day. And cases of women being abusive aren't as reported as cases of men being abusive. Duncan Fisher, the former Equality Opportunities Commissioner from the UK, actually explains this very well when he states that in the UK law, a father can only be a father if the mother approves him. She can do this in two ways: marry him or invite him to sign the birth certificate. If neither of these happen, he is not the father until the family court approves him. A man has to be vetted by the mother or the state before he is allowed to be a father, but the same does not apply to the mother. This sums it all up very well. Men are only allowed to be fathers if the mother is allowing him to be. Mothers have way more rights when it comes to the children than the father has, and it's harder for men to receive help when they split up from a partner and still want to be in their child's life. I know men right now who are scared of losing their children constantly because their exes are vindictive, and they know that if they wanted to, they could just leave and take the kids with them and the court wouldn't really be able to do much. Now, I said that I would talk about an example of women simply taking the father's kids away without any justifiable reason, and one good example of this is the case of the celebrity Jason Patrick. Now, if you're an MRA or a supporter of men having fair treatment when it comes to court cases and child custody battles, then you've probably already heard about this case, but I'll explain it for people who haven't heard about it anyway. Jason Patrick and his girlfriend had been trying for a baby for a long time, despite them not being in a stable relationship, and they ended up trying IVF in order to actually have the baby. Jason had actually tried operations in order to give his girlfriend a baby before this, but it didn't work out like they wanted to. They weren't in a proper romantic relationship, mainly a caring and loving one, but not romantic or fully sexual, but he knew that she wanted a child and he wanted to give her what she wanted. Once they had the child, their relationship had started to fully and completely break down, and suddenly, despite him having signed the appropriate parental papers and having rights to the child, he was all of a sudden labelled a sperm donor and the child was taken away from him. The mother and child moved away. This woman literally let this kid bond with Jason, let him think that he would have full contact with the child, and the second that the relationship broke down, that all went out the window. And because he's a celebrity, the situation was even more complicated, since her lawyers used that to slander him publicly and make the case even harder for him. This is an issue on its own where women will allow the bond to be formed and then take the bond away on a whim. It's not only unfair to the father, but also to the child. Now, the problem is that no one seems to care about this issue. Whenever I bring this up to women or feminists, their immediate response is to either deny that this is an issue, with no evidence, mind you, or try and say something like, well, what about the women who suffer because of the courts? Or, why are you only talking about the men who are suffering? Some have even said that it's men's own fault for never caring enough about their children. But the problem is, how can you show that you care about your child when the mother doesn't allow you to see them and a lot of times only wants money from you to help pay for the child's expenses and her own needs? We seem to live in a society where women have complete control over what their children do and everything regarding their lives. Except the money that they have to gather to raise a child, that always manages to slip away from their list of responsibilities. Feminists seem to be blocking this as an issue and making people genuinely believe that this shouldn't really be spoken about because, God forbid, there's an aspect of society where men aren't the evil oppressors and the women are the ones who have the upper hand. They fail to realise that the same courts that give the children to them are the court systems that they complain about that apparently run over their supposed patriarchy. This is a fucking joke. If it really was the patriarchy doing this, then why would they allow their fellow men to suffer? And I'm sorry, but you can't say that men created the patriarchy to oppress women and then oppress fellow men. That doesn't make any sense. Children need both parents in their lives. Trust me when I say that growing up without your dad, not being around as much as he needs to be, can fuck you up inside. And I can imagine that the same applies for growing up without your mother. The most important person to consider in these cases are the children. Mothers have a responsibility to put their child's needs ahead of their own. And one thing that they always need to ask themselves is, if they end up in a position when they're fighting for custody, they need to think to themselves, am I doing this because I hate this guy or because my child needs this? Alright guys, that's all I wanted to talk about. I could make this video hours long, but honestly, looking into this subject is fucking depressing. Thank you all for watching it all the way through though. Also, a big thank you to my friends Omegon and Tim for providing me with sources for this video. You two are awesome. I'll be linking their channels in the description below. Check them out. They're great people. Also, Omegon, I totally owe you a sandwich. Thank you. Also, sorry that the speed paint was really shit in this video. I'm using new software, and you lot know that I can't draw men or hands for shit, so yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, I will see you lot in the next video of whatever the fuck I decide to make next. Peace out, guys. Bye!